He leaned back in his chair, swirling his coffee, smirking like he'd won. "Stop dreaming, Emily. You'll never make it work." The word stung, but she just smiled. Because what he didn't know, she had already started, and what she built in secret would soon leave him begging for a second chance. Welcome to Revenge with Luke. Let's uncover what really happened. The words stung more than they should have, and I couldn't understand why. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background as my husband, Marcus, swirled his coffee in a mug that had long lost its charm. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, painting everything in warm, golden hues, but all I could focus on were the words he'd just said. "You need to stop dreaming, Emily. It's just not realistic." I sat frozen, my spoon still hovering over the half-eaten cereal in front of me. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if his words had constricted the space between us, leaving me gasping for air. "Stop dreaming," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. He didn't look at me when he said it again. "You're not a kid anymore. You can't keep living in some fantasy world. You got a family to take care of. You've got responsibilities." The weight of his words pressed down on me, sharp and heavy, like a stone lodged in my chest. It wasn't the first time he'd said something dismissive, but this cut deeper. I had hoped, maybe foolishly, that after all these years, he'd see me, truly see me. But today, the woman who had once been a vibrant dreamer, who had once filled the house with talk of ideas, ambitions, and possibilities, was nothing but a burden. I blinked, swallowing back the lump forming in my throat. I just thought, "You need to focus on what's real," he interrupted, not unkindly, but with finality. "And what's real is us, the family, your job. This is what matters now." I tried to say something, anything, but my mind felt clouded, like everything I had ever dreamed of was slipping through my fingers. I felt small, insignificant, like a faded picture on the wall, unnoticed and unimportant. I nodded, a quiet surrender, even as the sting of his words lingered in the air between us. But deep down, a spark of defiance flickered, one I hadn't seen in years. The days following Marcus's words were heavy, the air thick with unspoken tension. I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. Stop dreaming. It echoed in my head, a constant hum, a reminder of all the things I had buried for years. My dreams were no longer just fleeting thoughts. They had become ghosts of what could have been, haunting me in the quiet moments when I wasn't distracted by the demands of life. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions of daily routine. Making breakfast, taking care of the kids, checking emails, and sorting through bills. But it all felt distant, like I was watching my life unfold through a fogged-up window. The spark that used to light up my mornings, the ideas I'd once scribbled in notebooks late at night, now felt like distant memories I had outgrown. I remembered when I was younger, before we married, when the world felt full of possibilities. I had dreams, big ones, of starting a business, of writing a book, of traveling the world. I thought of all the nights I stayed up late, planning, imagining, believing that one day I could make it happen. But life, as it often does, had a way of wearing those dreams down, replacing them with the weight of responsibility. "We need stability," Marcus had always said, and I agreed. We had built a life together, a family, a home. I had put my dreams on hold, as any good wife and mother would, to support his career, to make sure the kids had everything they needed. And for a while, it was enough. I convinced myself that it was enough. But now, after everything, I wasn't so sure. Was I really content? Or had I simply given up on the person I once wanted to be? The silence that hung between us in the kitchen wasn't just about our words. It was about the years of deferred dreams, piled up like dust in the corners of my mind. And I couldn't help but wonder, was it too late to reclaim what I had lost? It started small, just little whispers of rebellion. I began waking up earlier than usual, before the house stirred with the sounds of Marcus getting ready for work or the kids shuffling around in the morning rush. I would make coffee, but instead of sitting down to watch the news like I'd always done, I would retreat to the back room, my small sanctuary, and open my laptop. I didn't have a clear plan yet, no roadmap or blueprint, just a feeling, a fluttering idea that wouldn't let go. I found myself revisiting old notebooks, the ones filled with half-formed business ideas, scribbled thoughts, dreams that had never been fully realized. I hadn't looked at them in years, and opening them now felt like uncovering pieces of a person I had almost forgotten. Someone brimming with potential, with ambition, someone who had once believed she could do anything. The woman whom Marcus had married had been that person, but over the years, she'd been pushed aside, like an old coat in the back of a closet, forgotten and left to gather dust. Each night, I read articles about starting a business, about marketing, about finding your niche. I started taking notes, jotting down questions, ideas, the faintest outline of something real. The rebellion wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, subtle, a whisper against the growing noise of my life. It was in the hours I stole for myself, the hours I refused to give up. I didn't share any of this with Marcus. He wouldn't understand. Not yet. And part of me wasn't ready to tell him. It wasn't about defiance. It was about taking ownership of something that was mine, something just for me. The first time I purchased supplies for the business, small things, nothing too expensive, I felt a rush of excitement mixed with guilt. My hand shook slightly as I clicked purchase online. It was a small step, but it was mine, and it was the first of many. A quiet rebellion against the years of stopping and settling. It wasn't much yet, but it was enough to remind me that I still had a spark. It was a chance encounter, the kind that felt like fate nudging me in a direction I hadn't considered. I was at the grocery store, pushing my cart through the aisles with a mind full of the usual chores when I bumped into someone from my past. Lena, a woman I had met years ago at a business conference. Back then, I had been eager, full of questions, and brimming with ideas, but life had swept me away in a different direction. I hadn't thought about her in years. She looked the same, maybe even more confident, her smile still warm but knowing, as if she carried a secret with her. I recognized her immediately, and the moment I did, I felt a pang in my chest. How long had it been since I'd allowed myself to feel that way? Alive with possibility. "Emily, right?" she said, her eyes bright with recognition. "It's been so long. How are you?" We exchanged pleasantries, and before I knew it, we were walking together through the aisles, catching up. I told her about the kids, about Marcus, about life, carefully leaving out the part where I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of unspoken dreams. Then Lena asked the question, "So what have you been up to? Anything exciting?" The question felt like a door opening. For a split second, I thought about telling her the truth, about the business I was quietly building, the plans I was secretly pursuing. But I hesitated. Instead, I gave her a safer answer, one that sounded good on the surface, but left out the spark that was starting to ignite within me. "I'm thinking about some things," I said, my voice soft. "Maybe something new." Lena's eyes lit up, her enthusiasm immediate. "You should. You've always had this amazing energy, Emily. You could totally do it. Don't let anything hold you back." Those words, simple and sincere, felt like a lifeline, a glimpse of what could be possible if I stopped holding myself back. For the first time in years, the flicker of hope inside me flared into something brighter. She had no idea how much her encouragement meant, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. I put the mask back on the next morning, just like I had every day for years. The mask of perfect wife, perfect mother, perfect daughter. The kind of perfection that existed in the small things. The spotless kitchen, the laundry folded neatly in piles, the way I smiled when Marcus came home, even though everything inside me felt like a mess. I made breakfast as usual, the aroma of bacon and eggs filling the house, though my mind was elsewhere. I wasn't really there. I was somewhere between who I was now and who I used to be, caught in the space between reality and the dreams I'd stuffed away for so long. But the mask I wore well. I smiled as Marcus kissed me goodbye, kissed the kids as they rushed out the door for school. Everything appeared to be normal, effortless, even. Inside, though, my chest felt tight, like I was suffocating in the suffocating silence of my own choices. My heart pounded every time I thought about what I was doing in secret. The business that was slowly taking shape, the emails I kept hidden, the spreadsheets of potential profits I guarded like a treasure. It felt dangerous, but exhilarating, like I was stepping into a world that wasn't mine. A world that wasn't meant for someone like me. But I wasn't ready to share this part of me with anyone. Not yet. Certainly not with Marcus, who had a way of diminishing my ideas with just a few words. Focus on what matters, he'd say, as if my dreams weren't worth the air they took up. As if who I was before, who I still was, didn't matter anymore. I spent the next few days moving through life with the mask firmly in place. I cooked dinner, cleaned the house, took the kids to soccer practice. And each time I smiled, each time I played the part, a small, quiet voice whispered inside me, reminding me of the truth I was holding back. I wasn't just Emily, the perfect wife. I was someone more. Someone with dreams and a fire that wasn't about to be extinguished. I couldn't ignore the spark anymore. It had been growing inside me for weeks, flickering to life every time I sat down in front of my computer, every time I jotted down another note about my business, about what I could do, about the future I had once imagined. It wasn't a huge shift, nothing dramatic, but the weight of it was undeniable. The longer I waited, the harder it became to ignore. That afternoon, while Marcus was out with the kids, I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and stared at the blinking cursor on the screen. It was time. I had been putting this off for so long, waiting for the right moment, but there was never going to be a right moment. If I didn't act now, I knew I never would. I opened up a new email draft, one I had started but never sent, a proposal to a supplier for the products I wanted to sell. I had done all the research, made all the plans. Everything had been prepared in secret, carefully measured so no one would notice. But now, staring at the screen, I felt a rush of excitement. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and in that moment, something inside me clicked. Without thinking too much, I typed out the email. I didn't hesitate. I didn't doubt myself. I hit send. As soon as I did, the weight lifted from my chest, and I felt a strange clarity, like the fog had finally cleared. I wasn't sure what would come of this. Maybe nothing, but maybe it was the first step towards something more than I'd ever dare hope for. I knew I was in uncharted territory, but for the first time in years, it felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I closed my laptop and sat back, breathing deeply. There was no turning back now. The spark had turned into action, and I could feel it, alive and burning within me. The dream I had once buried was finally waking up. It came through as a notification on my phone, a simple email, but it hit me like a wave. Order confirmation. Your item has sold. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, the words blurring together as the reality of it hit. My first sale. It wasn't much, a single product, but it was everything. It meant someone had believed in what I was offering, enough to pay for it. The small amount of money didn't matter. Not really. What mattered was that someone, somewhere, thought my idea had value. That thought was a jolt of electricity coursing through my veins. I sat there for a moment, the weight of it settling over me. I had done it. I had taken that first, terrifying step, and it had paid off. The dream that Marcus had dismissed so easily, the one I had buried for years, was now tangible, real. It wasn't just a fantasy anymore. It was something I had built with my own hands, my own effort. I didn't tell Marcus. I didn't even tell anyone. I couldn't yet. Not until I was sure. But I smiled to myself, a quiet triumph that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me. It felt like a victory, not just for the business, but for me, for the woman I was reclaiming. I grabbed a pen and scribbled the details of the sale in my notebook, marking it like a small milestone. Each step, no matter how small, was progress. This wasn't a hobby anymore. It was real, something I could build on. I went through the motions of the evening, dinner, helping with homework, the usual routine, but inside, I was buzzing. That one small sale had opened up a world of possibilities, a future I hadn't dared believe in until now. I wasn't just a wife and mother anymore. I was a business owner, an entrepreneur, someone who had the power to shape her own destiny. The fire inside me had grown, and I knew there was no going back. The silence was unbearable. It was like a thick fog had settled over the house, smothering everything it touched. Marcus hadn't said anything since the day I made my first sale, and that in itself spoke volumes. The weight of his unspoken words pressed down on me, suffocating me in ways that made it harder to breathe. I kept going through the motions, but every action felt mechanical, almost too perfect, as if I were trying to convince myself and everyone else that nothing had changed. Dinner was on the table at exactly 6 o'clock. The kids' homework was checked, the laundry was folded, and the house was spotless. I kept the mask of normalcy firmly in place, but behind it, my mind raced with the knowledge of what I was hiding. Marcus had noticed the small changes, the extra time I spent in my office, the long hours after the kids went to bed. He hadn't asked directly, but the questions were there, hanging in the air, unspoken but felt. What are you doing? Why are you so distant? But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Not yet. There was too much at stake. Too much I was still figuring out. So I remained silent, just like he had. But the silence between us wasn't comforting. It wasn't a peaceful lull in our marriage. It was a void, an absence of connection that I couldn't ignore. I glanced over at Marcus as he sat on the couch, staring at the TV, his face distant, his thoughts miles away. The man I had once known, the man who had stood by me when we built our lives together, was slipping away, and I wasn't sure how to reach him anymore. It was as if we had both been consumed by our own worlds, me with my secret ambitions, and him with his quiet disappointment. The tension was unbearable. Every word I didn't speak, every truth I withheld, only made the gap between us wider. But I couldn't stop now. The business was mine, and so was my future. The silence was loud, but I couldn't let it drown me. The struggle was silent, hidden beneath the surface, like an undercurrent that no one could see but felt all around. I could hear Marcus in the other room, his voice low as he spoke to the kids, but I wasn't really listening. My mind was consumed with the growing weight of everything I was balancing: my family, my marriage, my secret business, and the ever-present doubt that threatened to pull me under. I had hoped, naively, that the two worlds I was living in could remain separate: my role as the dutiful wife and mother, and the dreamer, the woman I was becoming, who was carving out a space for herself in a world that had long been dominated by others' expectations. But the line between the two had blurred, and now the struggle felt suffocating. The business was growing, slowly but steadily, but it came at a cost. Every sale, every new client felt like a victory, yet each one pulled me further away from the person I had once been. The late nights spent designing products, creating marketing plans, answering emails, they all bled into the hours I should have spent with Marcus, or at least pretending to. I was stealing moments, small pieces of time that I couldn't afford to give up. But I had to. I had to keep going. Some days, I felt like a fraud, wearing the mask of the perfect wife while secretly nurturing a life that didn't belong to anyone but me. Marcus didn't know, and I didn't know how to tell him. How could I explain this new version of myself? The one that had started to take root and wouldn't let go. The pressure was mounting, and I was starting to crack under the weight of it. My hands shook as I typed out emails, my heart racing every time I checked my phone, waiting for some sign that I was doing the right thing. Every time I was alone, I could feel the anxiety creeping in, telling me I wasn't enough. I wasn't enough of a wife. I wasn't enough of a mother. And now, I was questioning if I was even enough for myself. But there was no turning back now. I'd already started, and I couldn't stop. I wouldn't. It happened on a Tuesday evening, right after the kids had gone to bed. I was sorting through a pile of invoices, checking my business accounts, when the sound of Marcus's voice interrupted the quiet. He stood in the doorway, his face tight with something I couldn't read. "Can we talk?" he asked, his tone unusually sharp. My heart skipped. Here it comes, I thought. The questions I had been avoiding, the confrontation I had feared. I closed my laptop and nodded, setting it aside. I wasn't ready, but I couldn't keep hiding forever. He sat down across from me, his hands clasped in front of him. His eyes, once warm and understanding, now held something different: disappointment, maybe even anger. "I noticed the charges on the credit card," he said, his voice low but firm. "What is this? Business expenses? What exactly are you doing, Emily?" I felt a sharp pang in my chest. How'd he find out? I had been so careful, so deliberate in keeping everything separate, but there it was, out in the open. "It's nothing," I said quickly, my voice cracking under the weight of a lie. Just some small things for the... I hesitated, feeling the lie slip off my tongue too easily. His eyes darkened. You've been spending our money without telling me? Without even asking? His voice rose, a crack of frustration seeping through. What happened to us, Emily? You used to care about the things we built together. The life we built. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but the truth was too raw. I've been building something for myself, I said, my voice shaky but determined. Something I needed to do. Something I couldn't just let go. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing across the room. I don't understand, he muttered, more to himself than to me. You've been so distant lately. And now this? I thought we were partners. I felt the tears welling up, but I held them back. We are partners, Marcus, but I've been losing myself. I didn't know how to say it, so I built something that was mine. His silence hung between us like a weight, suffocating. The strain that had been building over months finally cracked, and I realized that the distance between us wasn't just about my business. It was about everything we had stopped sharing. The argument with Marcus lingered in the air long after the last word had been spoken. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, but something inside me had shifted. The rawness of his anger, the disbelief in his eyes, made me feel small for a moment, but it also lit a spark, a flicker of freedom I hadn't realized I craved until now. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, before anyone else was stirring. I needed a moment to breathe, to reclaim my space. I sat in the kitchen, sipping coffee, my fingers tracing the rim of the cup as my thoughts swirled. There was a sense of peace in the stillness, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about them, about the kids, about Marcus, about the perfect image I had to maintain. I was thinking about me, about the life I was slowly building. The business had grown, slowly but steadily. Each new order, each positive email from a customer felt like a small victory. And with each success, I could feel a small piece of me coming back to life. I wasn't just the wife or the mother anymore. I was something else, something I hadn't been in years, a woman with a purpose, with a future of her own. The taste of freedom wasn't in the money or the business. It was in the knowledge that I could make decisions for myself, that I didn't have to ask for permission. It was in the feeling of independence, the confidence that came from knowing I had built something from nothing, all on my own. I spent the day working, organizing the next steps for my business, but there was a lightness to my movements. Each email sent, each task completed, felt like an act of self-love, a way of affirming that I was worthy of more than the life I had settled for. The taste of freedom was sweet, but it was also bittersweet, because the more I embraced it, the more I realized that freedom came at a cost, and I wasn't sure what I was willing to lose to keep it. The weight of everything was beginning to crush me. What had started as an exciting new chapter, a chance to reclaim something of my own, was slowly morphing into something unsustainable. The business was growing, yes, but so was the tension at home. The constant balancing act was wearing me down, and I could feel my grip slipping. The late nights were becoming more frequent, the early mornings stretching longer. I was caught in a cycle of working on the business, then rushing through the motions of family life, try to maintain the image of the perfect wife and mother. I had promised myself I wouldn't let the two worlds collide, but they were doing so in ways I couldn't control. I started missing things, appointments, meetings, even simple moments with the kids. I would be in the middle of a conference call, only to hear the kids in the background, needing help with homework or asking for attention. Every time I had to silence the phone or leave a conversation unfinished, I felt like I was failing them. Failing Marcus. Failing myself. I hadn't told Marcus yet about how close the business was to becoming something big. I wanted to know, needed to, but every time I thought about it, I froze. How could I explain to him that the thing I had built in secret had become more important to me than I ever thought it would? How could I admit that my dreams, my ambitions had started to overshadow the life we had built together? The guilt gnawed at me constantly. I could feel myself unraveling, and yet I didn't know how to stop. Every step forward with the business felt like one step further away from the family I had once put first. The more I succeeded, the more I feared I was losing everything else. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the piles of bills and paperwork that had accumulated around me. My hands shook as I reached for my phone. It felt like I was sinking, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep myself afloat. I was standing in the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror when it hit me. The woman staring back at me looked exhausted, worn thin by the weight of a life I had been trying so hard to hold together. Her hair was messy, her eyes too tired to sparkle, and her shoulders sagged under the strain. But beneath all of that, something else, something stronger, was beginning to surface. I had spent so long trying to be everything for everyone else, burying my own needs, my own desires, beneath layers of responsibility and expectation. But now, in the quiet of this moment, I realized something important. I had lost myself in the process. Not just lost, but forgotten. The business wasn't just a way to escape, to fill a gap. It was a lifeline. It was the part of me I had neglected for so long, the part that had been suppressed under the weight of shoulds and musts. And yet, it wasn't just about the business. It was about me. It was about finding the woman I had been before, the woman who had dreams and plans and the ambition to build something for herself. The realization was sudden, like a door opening, a rush of air filling a room that had been suffocating for too long. I was not just a wife or a mother. I was Emily, and I deserved the chance to live fully, to chase my dreams without apology or fear of what others might think. I took a deep breath, feeling a calm that had eluded me for months. For the first time in a long time, I understood what I needed to do. I wasn't going to give up on me. I was going to face the mess I had created, the distance in my marriage, and the choices I had made. But I would do it on my terms, not anyone else's. As I turned away from the mirror, the weight felt lighter, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. Whatever came next, I was ready. The email came in the middle of the night, a simple notification, but the words made my heart skip. Congratulations, your order has been approved. You've been selected as a vendor for the Greenhouse Boutique. I stared at the screen, reading the message over and over, as if I couldn't quite believe it. My first major break. A real business opportunity, a chance to expand. It was more than just a sale. It was validation, proof that I wasn't just dreaming anymore. My hard work, the countless sleepless nights, the hustle to keep everything together. It was all coming together. I sat on the edge of my bed, the quiet of the house around me, and felt a rush of emotions. Excitement, relief, fear. The uncertainty that had gnawed at me for months was suddenly replaced by something stronger, pride. I had done this. I had pushed past the limits I thought were set in stone, and I was on the brink of something real. I didn't wake Marcus right away. He had enough on his mind, and I needed a moment to let the gravity of the situation sink in. This was it. I had built something that was not only sustainable, but thriving. And I wasn't done yet. The business would keep growing. It had to. The next morning, I could hardly contain my excitement. I walked into the kitchen, ready to share the news with Marcus. He looked up from his coffee, the same tired look in his eyes, but when he saw the smile on my face, something flickered in his gaze. "What's going on?" he asked, sensing the change. "I've been selected to supply the Greenhouse Boutique," I said, my voice trembling with the excitement I couldn't hold back. "This is it, Marcus. This is a real opportunity." He paused, looking at me for a long moment, and then nodded slowly. "That's great, Emily. Really great." It wasn't the outpouring of support I had hoped for, but it was enough. For now, it was enough. I was finally stepping into the light I had been reaching for, and no matter what came next, I knew I had built this for myself. The shift happened slowly, imperceptibly at first. A change in tone, a missed glance, a silence that lingered just a bit too long. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. Paranoia creeping in, fueled by the stress of the business and the strain at home. But as the days passed, the truth began to settle in, undeniable and heavy. Marcus was pulling away bit by bit, and I didn't know how to stop it. He wasn't overtly cruel, wasn't outright hostile, but the small things, The way he would glance at his phone during dinner or retreat into the living room with the TV on, avoiding conversation, spoke volumes. His support, once steady, was fading. And the worst part was, I didn't know how to bridge the gap that was growing between us. The business was taking off, no doubt about that. Every new client felt like a step forward, but it came at a cost. I found myself working late again and again, prioritizing the next sale, the next shipment, the next email over everything else. The mask of perfect wife and mother that I had worn for so long was starting to crack, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't go back to who I was before. I tried talking to Marcus, tried explaining how much this meant to me, how the business wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming a part of myself I had long ignored. But each conversation ended the same way, with him nodding, his expression unreadable, his silence louder than any words could be. One night, as I sat at the kitchen table, working on inventory, I heard his footsteps behind me. He stopped at the doorframe, leaning against it. His eyes met mine, tired and distant. "You're always busy now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We never talk anymore." I looked up, my heart sinking. "I'm trying, Marcus. I'm trying to make this work." But it felt like something was slipping through my fingers, something I wasn't sure I could catch again. The ground beneath me was shifting, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. The price of ambition is rarely something you can see until it's too late. I had always thought ambition was about striving for more, reaching higher, chasing something bigger. But now, as I sat at the kitchen table, the silence between Marcus and me stretching longer than I could stand, I realized the cost of my pursuit was more than just time or energy. It was the foundation of the life we had built. The business had grown faster than I ever expected. My days were filled with orders, meetings, and deadlines. Each victory brought a rush of exhilaration, but each rush also deepened the divide at home. Marcus and I were barely speaking anymore. We had become strangers sharing a space, drifting in different directions. I could feel the resentment building in him, and I couldn't blame him for it. I thought back to the early days when we were first married, when I had dreams, sure, but they didn't overshadow our life together. Back then, everything felt like it was shared between us, like we were partners in every sense. But now, there was an unspoken tension, a gap that widened with every late night. Every new success I celebrated quietly in the dark of my office, away from him. I tried to reach out, try to explain what this meant to me, but every time I did, it felt like I was speaking to a wall. His responses were clipped, his eyes distant. It was as if he was waiting for me to give up, to choose him over the business, but I wasn't sure I could anymore. The business had become more than just an escape. It was my way of proving to myself that I wasn't invisible. But now, as I saw Marcus retreat further into himself, I realized how much of our marriage I had sacrificed in the process. I had fought so hard to find something for myself, to build something real. But what was the point of success if it came at the cost of everything else? I didn't know the answer, but I knew I couldn't keep going like this. The price was becoming too high. The pull between the life I had built with Marcus and the one I was building for myself had become unbearable. It was a constant, tugging feeling in my chest, pulling me in two different directions. On one hand, there was the business, the future I had worked so hard to create, the independence I had fought to reclaim. On the other hand, there was Marcus and the family we had once dreamed of together, the life that had once felt stable, even if it had started to feel suffocating. Every time I looked at him now, I saw the distance, the hurt. He was slipping away, and I couldn't tell if I was losing him because of my success or because we had simply grown apart. The silent dinners, the nights spent in different rooms. Everything felt like a quiet surrender, like we were both waiting for the other to make a move. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want to give up the life I had fought for. I didn't want to give up me. But then I'd look at the kids, at their smiling faces, and I would feel the weight of the choice pressing down on me. They didn't ask for this life where their mother was always busy, always distracted, always too tired to sit and listen. And Marcus, I couldn't forget how he had once been my biggest cheerleader, the one who stood by me when I needed him. Now, he was the one who seemed the most distant, the most angry. I found myself standing at the edge of a precipice, not knowing which direction to go. Each path seemed like it would lead to loss. If I chose the business, would I lose my family? If I chose my family, would I lose the woman I had finally rediscovered? The ground beneath me felt like it was crumbling, and every step I took seemed to push me farther away from the balance I'd hoped to find. There was no easy answer, no simple solution. The world I was caught in was filled with impossible choices, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending that everything was fine. The breaking point came like a slow, inevitable crash. It had been building for weeks, months maybe, but I had refused to acknowledge it. The tension between Marcus and me had escalated, but I had pushed it aside, convincing myself that everything would work itself out. I told myself the business was just a phase, that we could find a way to balance it all, that things would go back to normal if I just worked harder, worked faster. But normal had long since disappeared. It started with a small argument, something trivial, a missed appointment, a forgotten chore. But what should have been a fleeting moment of irritation escalated quickly. Marcus's voice was sharp, more biting than it had been in weeks. "You're always so busy, Emily. You don't have time for anything anymore. Not for me, not for the kids, just for that damn business." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had heard them before, but this time they weren't just frustration. They were the culmination of months of silence, of resentment. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say? How could I explain that I wasn't just building a business, that I was rebuilding myself? "You don't understand," I said, my voice faltering. "This isn't just about the business. It's about who I am, who I've been, lost for so long, waiting for a chance to feel like I matter." He stared at me, his face a mixture of anger and hurt. "So, this is what matters to you now? Not us. Not this family." The silence that followed felt suffocating. He was right. In my pursuit of something bigger, something mine, I had neglected the very things I claimed to care about the most. The realization hit like a ton of bricks. I had been holding on to my dream, my ambition, my sense of independence. But at what cost? I could feel the fracture between us deepening with every word unspoken, every night spent apart in the same house. The truth hung heavy in the air between us. Something had to change, and I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to face what that change might be. I stood at the edge of everything I had built, looking down at the wreckage I hadn't even seen coming. My heart pounded, the weight of the argument with Marcus still fresh in my chest, but something was stirring inside me, something I hadn't recognized until now. Amid the anger, the frustration, the unbearable silence that had stretched between us, I realized something crucial. I had been running from myself for years. I had always been defined by the roles I played. Wife, mother, caregiver. Those were the labels I wore proudly, the ones I thought gave me purpose. But somewhere along the way, I had lost the person I had once been, the woman who had dreams, who had passions, who believed she could do anything. I had buried her beneath the weight of obligations, of responsibilities, of a life that, despite how much I had loved it, no longer felt like my own. The gift of self-discovery didn't come in an instant. It wasn't something I could easily wrap up and present as a neatly tied package. It was a slow, painful unearthing, like brushing off the dirt from a buried treasure. But now, standing here, looking at the shattered pieces of my marriage and my dreams, I saw it. The gift wasn't in the success of the business or the achievements I could point to. It was in the realization that I could be more than what others expected of me. I could be someone who chose herself, who wasn't afraid to dream, to fail, to grow. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid of the unknown. Yes, there were risks, huge, terrifying risks, but the truth was I had been living in fear for far too long. Fear of disappointing others, fear of letting go of the life I had known. Now, the fear was gone. I had learned that it was okay to choose myself, to prioritize my own growth, my own happiness. And as I stood there, staring at the mess I had created, I knew one thing. This was only the beginning. I wasn't just rebuilding my business. I was rebuilding me, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The morning light felt different now, softer, like it was offering me a chance to start fresh. The weight of the past few months, the arguments, the guilt, the constant tug-of-war between who I was and who I was becoming, had finally loosened its grip. I was standing on the edge of something new, something I hadn't expected to feel again. Hope. I woke up early, before the house had fully come alive. I made coffee, not because I needed it, but because it felt like the first step in claiming my mornings back. I used to savor these quiet moments, back when life felt simpler, before everything had become about the hustle of trying to keep up with everyone else's expectations. Today, I wanted to savor this moment, just for me. The business was growing, but it was no longer the thing I clung to for validation. It was a part of me now, but it didn't define me. I defined it. Marcus was still asleep, but I didn't feel the same heaviness when I looked at him. The conversation we had, the rawness of it, had been difficult, but it had also given me something I hadn't realized I needed: clarity. The truth was, I didn't have all the answers yet. I didn't know what the future of our marriage would look like, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to stop letting fear dictate my life. I had spent too long living in a state of quiet desperation, hoping things would change without ever truly changing myself. As I sat at my desk, sipping my coffee, I opened my laptop and started drafting new goals for the business. Not just numbers or sales projections, but the kind of goals that felt right for me. The kind of work that fulfilled me, that made me excited to wake up every day. Today wasn't just a fresh start for my business. It was a fresh start for everything. I was no longer holding my breath, waiting for approval. I was breathing freely for the first time in a long time. The future was wide open, and I was ready to step into it. I didn't expect it to happen. I didn't expect anyone to step in at just the right moment, to offer the kind of support I hadn't even known I needed. But there she was, Lena, the woman I had met at that business conference years ago. The one I had briefly exchanged ideas with but never thought I'd hear from again. I had nearly forgotten about her until I got an unexpected text one afternoon. "Hey Emily, it's Lena. I know we've been out of touch, but I've been following your progress. I'm impressed by what you're building. Let's catch up soon." I almost didn't respond. My mind was clouded with the usual worries. The business, Marcus, the kids, everything. But something inside me hesitated. Maybe it was the part of me that still felt so disconnected, so desperately in need of someone who understood what I was going through. I hit reply. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place where the hum of conversation and the scent of coffee felt like a warm blanket. Lena was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table near the window, a notebook open in front of her. She looked up when I walked in, her face lighting up with a genuine smile. "Emily," she said, standing to hug me. "It's so good to see you. I've been following your business from afar. You're doing amazing things." It felt strange, hearing those words come from someone else. "Thank you." I stopped myself. I didn't know how to explain how much I needed to hear that right now. As we sat down and began talking, I realized how much I had underestimated Lena. She wasn't just a friendly acquaintance from a past life. She was a mentor, someone who had walked a similar path, who knew the challenges of balancing ambition with personal life. She listened without judgment, offering advice that was both practical and empathetic. "You're doing great, but you don't have to do it all alone," she said, leaning in with a knowing look. "Don't let fear keep you from reaching out when you need help." Her words felt like a lifeline, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't in this alone. The unexpected consequence hit harder than I anticipated. I had spent months building the business in secret, slowly pushing past the limits of what I thought was possible for myself. But now it felt like the very thing I had worked so hard to protect was unraveling in a way I couldn't control. It all started innocently enough. A phone call from my accountant, who sounded unusually tense. "Emily," he said, his voice low, "I think you need to take a look at something." The next few hours were a blur of confusion, frustration, and disbelief. It turned out that my business, despite its steady growth, had been flagged for some discrepancies in the financial records. Nothing criminal, nothing outright fraudulent, but enough to raise eyebrows. Small errors that I hadn't noticed, subtle miscalculations that seemed harmless at the time, but now felt like a potential bombshell. I stared at the spreadsheets in front of me, my mind racing. How'd I miss these? How had something so simple, something I thought I had under control, slipped through the cracks? I hadn't been careless, but I'd been focused on the bigger picture, on building something that could change my life. I hadn't anticipated the small, quiet missteps along the way, and now they were threatening to undo everything. Marcus, sensing the shift in the air, walked into the room just as I hung up the phone. His eyes narrowed as he saw the panic on my face. "What's wrong?" he asked. I hesitated, the weight of the situation sinking in. I made a mistake, a big one, and it might cost us." The silence between us was thick, the consequences of my actions finally catching up with me. I had fought so hard to make this work, to prove to myself and to everyone else that I could succeed on my own. But now, I was facing the reality that success didn't come without its own set of challenges, and the price was steeper than I had expected. The ground felt shaky beneath me, and I realized just how fragile this whole journey had been. It wasn't just the business I had to protect now. It was everything. The final decision loomed over me like a storm cloud, dark and inevitable. Yet it was one I had been circling for months. The tension between Marcus and me had reached a breaking point, and the cracks that had once been invisible were now impossible to ignore. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, torn between my business and my family. It was no longer sustainable, and every day I waited to make a choice, it felt like a piece of me was slipping away. The business had grown, yes. It was thriving in ways I had only dreamed about. But at what cost? My marriage was fraying at the edges, my connection with Marcus distant, like we were both living in parallel universes. The man I had once shared everything with now seemed like a stranger. We had tried to talk about it, tried to fix the rift, but nothing changed. I could feel the resentment building, the quiet betrayal hanging in the air between us. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the list of goals I had written for the business, the vision I had crafted for myself. It was all right there, everything I had worked for, everything I had dreamed of. But then my gaze shifted to the family photos on the wall, the moments of happiness, the memories of the life we had once shared. Could I walk away from that? Could I sacrifice everything for a dream that might never be enough? I realized that the question wasn't about choosing one over the other. It was about who I was willing to become. Could I still be the woman I wanted to be without losing everything else? Was it possible to have both a successful business and a family? Or would something have to break? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle over me. I wasn't sure what the answer was yet, but I knew this was a choice I had to make on my own terms. Whatever happened next, I would face it head on, because for the first time in a long time, I was finally ready to choose myself. The moment of decision had passed, and with it, something inside me shifted. The weight that had been pressing down on me for so long began to lift, replaced by a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. I had chosen me, but it wasn't a selfish decision. It was a reclamation, a reinvention of who I was and what I wanted from this life. The weeks that followed were a blur of hard work and emotional rebuilding. I didn't just rebuild my business. I rebuilt myself. I learned how to be the woman who had dreams, who had the strength to pursue them without asking for permission, but who also knew how to balance what truly mattered. I sat with Marcus one evening, after everything had quieted down. The tension still lingered, but there was a new understanding between us. He had finally started to see that this wasn't just about a business. It was about me regaining my sense of self, my identity, which I had almost forgotten in the years of trying to please everyone else. I don't know where we're going from here, I told him honestly, but I know this is my path, and I can't walk it if I'm not true to who I am. He nodded, his face still guarded, but there was something in his eyes, recognition, maybe even a hint of respect. "I get it," he said quietly, "but just know I'm still here, if you want me to be." I took a deep breath, the weight of the unspoken agreement settling between us. It wasn't a promise of perfection, but it was a start. The business continued to grow, stronger and more defined with each passing day. And I too grew. I learned that success wasn't just measured in profits or achievements. It was in the strength to stand tall, to build something that was entirely mine without losing who I was along the way. Reclamation and reinvention weren't just about rebuilding a life. They were about owning it. And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. And that was enough.